Hey everybody, so I just wanted to make a quick video on the state of the market going into this trading week. So the market clearly seems to be a little bit spooked. So we've seen futures on the Dow decline by 77 points. We've seen the futures on the S&P decline by 0.2% and on the Nasdaq slip by 0.1%. Now, this is despite last week seeing a record close on the S&P and a slight decline on the Nasdaq. Okay. Now, what are the reasons for this? I want to spend some time understanding, are we going to switch into a risk-off week this week? And I think my opinion is we will probably see a risk-off week. And you've seen there's a few different things I want to point out. So the first is we know there's an emerging kind of spooking from Delta. People are a bit scared about Delta. They're seeing the cases double over the last 2 weeks. And I think this can clearly weigh on a lot of the investors. You've seen from my previous video, Michigan University produced their consumer sentiment index, and that has fallen to low. It plummeted to 70.1, and this normally, that sort of level of decline, 13% decline, the last few times that has happened was only in the pandemic and then the recession of 2008. So I can see that weighing on investors as well. Adding on to that, superposing onto that, we've also got the backdrop of China. So China had just announced that they've had a slowing in retail sales and industrial production, and fixed asset investment is rising slower than forecast. And this is a bit of a concern because the way it's worked since the pandemic is China were always considered as a quarter ahead of the rest of the world, just because that's when they started their cases and tracking the cases. So they were always a quarter ahead as far as investors are concerned. And that means we constantly look to them as where our figures will lead to in the next quarter. So for us, Q3. So when we're seeing a slowdown in their retail sales, industrial production, and we've got a whole bunch of the biggest American retail companies delivering earnings this week. We've got Target, we've got Walmart. This is a bit of a concern going into that. So the slowdown is clear for everybody to see. The Delta outbreak has returned and it seems to be shutting down parts of China. And this is worrying for the States because the States, like I said, have just had a doubling of cases. And I can definitely see us switching to risk off given that uncertainty. Now, we've got a New York area manufacturing index due for release on Monday, which is today. And so that may provide us some insights. The retail earnings may give us some insights and buoy some confidence, but generally it looks like we're going to be in for a risk off. Now, added to that, we've also got the backdrop of what's happening in Afghanistan. A bit of a concern for Joe Biden there around his foreign policy. And generally, foreign policy doesn't always impact the stock market. If you were to plot, the war of the last 20 years and if that's infected the US stock market, it hasn't. US stock market continued to go from strength to strength. But on the micro and this week, given the attention it's going to gather, I wouldn't be surprised if that causes a bit of uncertainty in the market and maybe a bit of a rotation into some risk off, which will be good for some fixed assets. So that's kind of my take on where we are this week. You've got the balance of Delta, you've got weak consumer sentiment, still high inflation, even though the reading came in as an inflection point. You've got retail companies giving earnings with the backdrop of China showing slowed retail sales and production. And I think that can really weigh on investors this week. So futures aren't looking good. Like I said, we're down on all the three key future indices in the US market. London had opened up down quite significantly. I think it was over 1% at the last time I checked for the FTSE. So we're just probably about 2 hours away from the US market opening. And I feel like it looks like we're going to be in a risk-off environment. Okay, so there you have it, guys. That's my state of the market heading into the open for this week, and I'll see you in the next one.